So the approval of pegcetacoplan is like an amazing advance, if you will, for the glomerular disease world. Many of your listeners will know that for years and years and years we just have not had anything we can actually use to treat patients with C3G and immune complex MPGN. But now pegcetacoplan is actually our second agent, but even more importantly, is the fact that it's the agent that is going to get approved or got approval for transplant and for children. So we have now reached that amazing next population that we just haven't had a therapeutic for. Like a lot of the other glomerular diseases, pegcetacoplan was actually approved on the primary endpoint of proteinuria, and I think that. And it wasn't just a small achievement of that outcome, actually. 68% improvement, if you will, in the proteinuria as compared to placebo. So really amazing. And depending on which cohort you look at globally, we really do believe that proteinuria relates to over time a loss of kidney function. So the fact that we would achieve such a substantial primary endpoint in this study is from a clinician standpoint pretty amazing finding and obviously very satisfying for the approval of this drug. I think what we always worry about when we're thinking about the use of complement inhibitors is whether your patient is going to be at risk for encapsulated organisms, for instance. And there's at least three that we focus on. But the real point here really is that in the 26-week placebo-controlled trial of pegcetacoplan, there were no reported encapsulated organism infections. And so what we may have worried about and what was certainly watched very closely during the clinical trial just didn't happen. So that also ends up being a very important endpoint for those of us in the clinical side. For the longest time, we didn't have anything that was, routinely efficacious, I'll say, for this group of patients, but also, frankly, that had significant side effects that your patients were watching out for. The addition to alternative pathway blockade via something like pegcetacoplan, it becomes an amazing event for us, right? Um, I unfortunately, there we're at this sort of odd phase where we're still sort of functioning to a degree under KDIGO guidelines. For instance, there will still be some physicians until they're been made aware that this phase 2 or excuse me, phase 3 is done and that the drug is approved, et cetera, that may in fact still use what is currently being classed as standard of care, meaning mycophenolate mofetil and steroids. But I think as soon as the word gets widely disseminated, as soon as people actually read, the publication on the phase 3 trial, as soon as people potentially even have their own experience with the drug, that will change completely as far as I'm concerned. Now, what I believe is that KDIGO will actually update their guidelines, that there may even be other expert groups that will update their guidelines or create a guideline, if you will, that will allow us. I happen to be in the camp that believes that AP blockade first is going to be a more appropriate choice, but we need all of the experts to come together and decide that and hopefully get that guideline published. And then I think it'll be a lot easier for people who don't see C3G or immune complex GN quite as frequently. I think they'll be able to then launch on what I believe is going to be a more appropriate approach down the road. Yeah, so I think that if you think about what the underlying pathomechanism is for C3G and probably for the majority of immune complex MPGN patients, we're classically thinking about the alternative pathway. But even more particularly, we are thinking about the convertases, which are the central enzymes of that pathway. And they are made up of C3 and factor B. So in fact, that is the two now approved complement inhibitors, right? A C3 inhibitor and a factor B inhibitor. So it's super exciting that we now have two agents that actually will target that important protein or set of proteins, if you will. But then I think that the differences in so that's from a mechanistic standpoint, and that's from a targeting the alternative pathway standpoint. But we do have one agent is actually oral, one agent is actually subcutaneous infusion. The oral one is twice a day. The subcutaneous infusion is twice a week. So you can see that this is going to sort out. Some of it will be patient preference, some of it will be physician preference. Of course, there will be people that will take one look at the phase 2 results and say, well, I'm going to choose pegcetacoplan because it had the better clinical trial results. Another physician is going to say, no, I'm going to choose the other agent because it's oral. So there is going to be some patient slash provider preferences, for a number of different reasons, frankly. Since we now have a therapeutic that targets the AP, I can get excited about what's next, right? So, not to be complacent about the fact that we now have a treating agent, but I can get excited about what's next. And the first thing is going to be, for me actually is that does this equate to we have said that reducing proteinuria equates to better renal outcome over time. So what I really want to see is a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, do we really have that stable GFR that we thought that reducing the proteinuria would predict? Again, this particular agent, pegcetacoplan, has reported out 52-week data. It looks excellent. I hope that that goes on for, the next 52 weeks and the next 52 weeks, but it's something that I as a clinician actually need to see. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I think it's very easy to say we need real world data, safety data. I want to know that those good safety results that we got in the 26 weeks, and actually, frankly, again, I mentioned they've already reported out 52-week data. I really want to know that that actually translates to real world use of the drug because it makes a difference for me about can I ever relax about this patient group and actually be able to just know that they're safe, but yet very well treated. So that's important. And then, I often introduce this also because I am half a pediatrician. Uh, what was really exciting about the pegcetacoplan approval is I now can get to the 12-year-old. To be fair, the other agent is doing their study. They'll potentially be able to get to the 12-year-old here fairly soon, but I can now get to that 12-year-old. But I'm going to poke even harder and say, I want to be able to get to the 8-year-old. I want to be able to get to the child that's even younger because it does happen younger. So, that's, perhaps my next best hope for where we're going in the future. Yeah, I would only bring up because it's near and dear to my heart because of a recent set of meetings that we've just had, that access is going to be very important. And when I say access to the drug, what I really mean is a multi-prong approach, getting patients diagnosed quicker, getting them on the drug faster, but can we actually get the drug actually to the patient that needs it? So these are going to be some of the issues that I think are also going to be hot items in the future. Perhaps there'll be places in the world that won't have access problems. In fact, perhaps in the US, we won't have as many problems, but there will be places that might have them. So I definitely have my ear to thinking about access to for instance, pegcetacoplan and actually getting the patient to get exposed to it. So it's going to be an important time or an important thing for us to focus on in the future, I believe.